There is a place inside you where no storm can touch, no insult can wound, no voice can shake the truth of who you are, and that, my friend, is where your power lives. Emotional sovereignty is the quiet revolution that begins within, a defiant declaration that your inner world is yours and yours alone. It is not granted by others, nor is it built on external validation. It is claimed with intention, with patience, with practice. To live with emotional sovereignty is to awaken to the truth that nobody can make you feel anything unless you give them the key to your emotional home. It's to walk through the chaos and noise of the world without letting it seep into your soul. And yet, so many of us are raised to believe that our emotions are reactions instead of responses, as if we are leaves in the wind rather than trees rooted in the soil of our own self-awareness. We are taught to take offense quickly, to feel slighted easily, to let other people's moods or words determine our peace. In doing so, we become prisoners to every eye roll, every criticism, every silence that we interpret as rejection. We hand over our power not in grand gestures, but in small daily surrenders. But emotional sovereignty is the opposite of that helplessness. It's knowing that while you may feel sadness, anger, or disappointment, you are not obligated to let those emotions become your identity or your guide. It is to say, yes, I feel this, but I decide what I do with it. That is the difference between being ruled and being sovereign. It is not about being numb, not about bottling up, not about denying your feelings. In fact, it is the radical act of honoring your emotions while refusing to be dominated by them. Just as a queen doesn't abandon her throne when a storm rattles the windows, you do not abandon your center every time discomfort knocks. Emotional sovereignty gives you the stillness to examine what you feel and the strength to respond rather than react. Too often we find ourselves lashing out or shutting down because we believe we've been wounded by others. But the wound isn't in their words, it's in our readiness to accept those words as truth. It lies in the hidden belief that others hold power over us. And so we jump to defend, to retaliate, to correct someone else's perception. But that is emotional slavery. A constant need to manage how we are seen, how we are treated, how we are understood. When you reclaim your emotional sovereignty, you no longer chase approval or run from judgment. You are no longer a puppet pulled by the strings of public opinion. You choose which voices enter your temple. You choose what defines you. This kind of mastery takes deep work. It asks you to know yourself intimately, to sit with your pain and your patterns and your pride. It calls you to notice how easily you are provoked and to ask why. What is the wound beneath the reaction? What belief about yourself is being poked by someone else's carelessness? That is where the real transformation begins, not in controlling others, but in illuminating yourself. Because when you understand your triggers, they no longer own you. When you face your emotional landscape without fear, you become sovereign over it. Not perfect, not always composed, but aware and in command. Let the world swirl. Let people come and go. Let them misunderstand you, criticize you, or ignore you. Emotional sovereignty says, none of that defines me. It says, I will not lower myself to match someone else's turmoil. It is the difference between being reactive and being reflective. Where reaction is impulsive, reflection is intentional. Sovereignty doesn't mean silence, but it does mean measured speech. It means understanding the weight of your words and the cost of your energy. You don't have to argue every point. You don't have to attend every fight you're invited to. You don't even have to respond to every disrespect. Sometimes the most sovereign thing you can do is walk away, not out of weakness, but out of the wisdom that your peace is priceless. People who lack control of their own emotions will always try to control yours. They will bait you, provoke you, project onto you, but your job is not to absorb their chaos. Your job is to be so firmly rooted in your worth that their storms pass around you, not through you. Emotional sovereignty is knowing that you are the gatekeeper of your energy. It's drawing boundaries without guilt. It's feeling everything, but choosing what leads. It's loving yourself enough to not let the world dictate your weather. It is a practice, a discipline, and yes, a form of sacred rebellion against a culture that feeds off outrage and reactivity. There is a silence that shrinks and trembles in the face of confrontation, and there is a silence that stands tall, commanding, grounded, unshaken. Too often the world mistakes silence for weakness, misreads quiet for surrender, and labels calm as fear. But there is a rare kind of silence that does not bow. It watches, it listens, it endures, and in that endurance, it reveals a power far greater than noise could ever muster. This silence does not seek approval, does not rush to defend itself, and does not require explanation. It is not born of fear, it is born of mastery. It does not crouch in the corner of conflict. It stands in the center of it, unbothered. In a world addicted to shouting, to proving, to asserting itself through volume, this kind of silence disrupts. It unnerves, because people are not used to silence that commands a room more than any raised voice ever could. When you speak from impulse, when you react quickly to every insult, when you leap into every argument like it's a war you must win, you lose something sacred. You lose the ability to choose your timing. And timing is everything. Silence, in its truest form, is a deliberate choice, not a passive absence. It is the art of saying, I could speak now, but I choose not to. I could react, but I withhold. I could enter the chaos, but I remain in control. And that control is not just over your tongue, but over your energy, your dignity, and your direction. Silence, when chosen from strength, becomes a mirror to others. It reflects back their noise, their insecurity, their chaos, and in doing so, it exposes them. The louder they become, the clearer your restraint becomes a form of leadership. Not leadership in the sense of command over others, but leadership over yourself. To lead oneself is to be unpressured by provocation, unshaken by misunderstanding, and uninterested in petty validation. That is the silence that does not submit, it reigns. Many believe that if you do not speak up, you are conceding the argument, forfeiting your place. But there is a kind of wisdom that knows every conflict does not require your presence. Not every false claim deserves a rebuttal. Not every criticism must be corrected. There is maturity in the pause, in the restraint, in the choice to let others believe what they will while you remain anchored in your truth, because silence, when rooted in self-respect, becomes a language of its own. It speaks louder than words could manage. It says, I know who I am. I do not need to prove it to you. That kind of silence is sharp. It slices through noise with elegance. It denies the energy of the argument its oxygen. And when people realize they cannot move you, that their attacks find no home in your heart, they lose their power. Not because you fought them, but because you didn't. Silence also grants space for perception. When you do not rush to fill the room with your reaction, you begin to see. You see the motives behind the words. You hear what is not being said. You read the fear beneath the anger, the projection beneath the insult. Silence sharpens your intuition. It is in silence that wisdom gathers, because if you are always speaking, always defending, always trying to be heard, you miss what is being revealed. You miss the patterns, the truths, the warning signs. You forfeit the vantage point that silence grants, And in losing that vantage point, you begin to react like everyone else, in haste, in emotion, in ego. But silence, true silence, slows everything down. It lets the noise pass like a storm overhead while you remain untouched in your stillness. And silence does not mean absence of feeling. On the contrary, it often means you are feeling everything deeply, powerfully, but you are choosing to filter it through patience and poise. You may feel the heat rise in your chest, the sting in your pride, the rush to defend your name, but you do not surrender to that moment. You let it pass through you without owning it. That is not weakness, that is discipline, and discipline is the soil where power grows. There is an undeniable magnetism to a person who does not react the way the world expects them to, who does not crumble under criticism, who does not flail in the face of offense. That kind of person has built an inner kingdom, and silence is the gate that guards it. This silence is not passive, it is surgical. It removes what is unnecessary, what is emotional debris. It separates what is true from what is simply loud. It does not chase clarity from others. It trusts that clarity will reveal itself. It lets time speak. It lets actions echo. And while others are tangled in noise and confusion, silence watches, absorbs, and waits for the right moment, if that moment ever even comes. Because the truth is, sometimes silence is the moment. Sometimes it is the full statement. Sometimes it is the mic drop, the exclamation, the exit, and it leaves others standing in the vacuum of their own noise, wondering why their chaos didn't pull you in, didn't shatter your stillness, didn't make you less than who you are. There is a burden many people carry that was never theirs to begin with, a weight placed upon them by others' opinions, projections, fears, and expectations. And the tragedy is that most don't even realize it. They live each day under invisible heaviness, absorbing insults that were not true, accepting shame that was never earned, responding to criticisms that were born from someone else's insecurity. But when you know who you are, not on a surface level, but at the deepest core of your being, you stop picking up every stone someone throws your way. You stop apologizing for existing, for being different, for not bending into the shape others demand of you. There is a sacred clarity that comes with self-knowledge, a kind of internal compass that lets you distinguish between what belongs to you and what never did. And with that clarity, you learn the quiet, dignified power of refusal, the power to say, "This is not mine to carry." So many people go through life thinking they must respond to everything, fix everything, explain everything. They carry guilt for not being enough, for being too much, for not being what others expected. They carry blame for things they didn't break. They carry the disappointment of others as if it were their responsibility to fill everyone else's empty spaces. They shrink to make others feel tall, or they contort to avoid being labeled as arrogant, difficult, or selfish. But self-knowledge liberates you from all of that. It teaches you to see yourself clearly, not through the smudged lens of someone else's bitterness, not through the fog of societal judgment, but through the clean, steady mirror of truth. When you know your heart, your values, your purpose, and your integrity, you stop letting people rewrite your story. You stop feeling the need to prove, to perform, or to earn worth that is already yours. People will always have something to say. They will misunderstand you. They will judge you from the outside without ever asking what lives on the inside. They'll project their wounds onto your intentions, their limitations onto your dreams. But when you are rooted in self-awareness, their projections don't find a place to stick. You don't absorb their pain as your punishment. You don't let their confusion become your burden. You recognize it for what it is, theirs, and you leave it where it belongs. This is not indifference. This is not cruelty. This is spiritual maturity. Because when you carry what isn't yours, you break your back trying to fix what was never broken in you. You spend your energy defending against shadows. You let your peace be dictated by people who haven't earned a say in your journey. To know yourself is to befriend your own voice so deeply that outside noise doesn't shake you. It means you've looked into your own darkness and seen your light. You've faced your own flaws and forgiven yourself. You've learned your worth not from applause, but from reflection. That kind of self-knowing builds a quiet force inside you, a voice that whispers, "You do not have to carry this." You do not have to carry someone's bitterness because they couldn't understand your joy. You do not have to carry shame because someone tried to humiliate you into silence. You do not have to carry fear that does not originate from your own spirit. And you do not have to carry the weight of every misunderstanding or misjudgment that lands at your feet. Let them fall. Let them stay there. Not everything deserves to be lifted. The truth is, some people will only see you through the lens of their own unhealed wounds. They will assign motives to your actions, twist your silence into arrogance, your confidence into pride. But none of that defines you. Only you can do that. And when you are firmly rooted in who you are, you begin to move through life differently. You walk into rooms without needing to be accepted. You speak without fear of being liked. You stand tall, not because you think you're better, but because you know you are whole. You can offer grace without surrendering your dignity. You can listen without absorbing. You can love without losing yourself in the process. You know your name, your calling, your value, and that knowing becomes armor and light all at once. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, "Why don't they like me?" you ask, "Is this relationship aligned with who I am?" Instead of, "Did I do something wrong?" you ask, "Is this my responsibility to fix?" You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop apologizing for your growth. You stop translating your soul into a language others can digest. You simply live, and you live truthfully. And that kind of life, anchored, aware, unapologetic, isn't just liberating for you. It gives others permission to do the same. Because when you show the world that you will no longer carry what is not yours, you model what freedom looks like. Not the kind of freedom that screams for attention, but the kind that radiates from within. A quiet, unwavering reminder that peace is found not in pleasing others, but in knowing yourself. There comes a point in one's life when taking offense becomes too heavy to carry. It drains, distracts, and diminishes the spirit. Offense is a fire that burns only the one who holds it. It is the instant sting, the sharp pull in the chest, the inner voice that screams, "How dare they?" A voice we all know too well. But what if, instead of letting that voice rise in rage, we chose another path? What if we turned offense not into reaction, but into reflection? What if, in the space between stimulus and response, we chose to observe rather than absorb? This is not weakness. This is not surrender. This is self-command. To turn offense into observation is to rise above the immediate emotion and instead study it, examine its roots, and decide whether it even deserves to bloom within us. Most people live on a short fuse. A sideways glance, an offhand comment, a missed call, these are enough to set them off. The heart races, the fists clench, the voice sharpens, but none of this leads to peace. All it leads to is a cycle where the emotions of others control your state of being. To live offended is to live enslaved to the opinions, actions, and words of everyone around you. But to observe is to reclaim that power, to watch without jumping to conclusions, to feel without being led by those feelings, to recognize that not every disrespect is personal and not every insult is true. That is maturity, and it's a hard-earned one. It takes patience to pause. It takes awareness to see that the person who hurt you may be speaking from their own pain, their own blindness, their own history that has nothing to do with you. Observation is what separates the wise from the reactive. When someone says something sharp, cruel, or dismissive, the reactive mind rushes in to defend, to counterattack, to protect pride. But the observing mind asks, why did that bother me? What part of me feels threatened? Is this person's judgment grounded in truth or in their own unresolved struggle? You start to see patterns. You begin to notice that some people are critical of everyone, not just you. Some lash out at others because they are deeply disappointed with themselves. Some try to wound because they feel invisible, and suddenly their words lose their teeth. You stop taking it all so personally. You stop internalizing poison that was never meant for your spirit. You develop the ability to hear the tone without swallowing the toxin. Turning offense into observation doesn't mean you don't feel hurt. It means you don't let that hurt drive the car. It means you sit with it, honor it, and then ask what you can learn from it. Maybe it's revealing a tender place in you that still needs healing. Maybe it's exposing where you're giving others too much authority over your sense of worth. Maybe it's simply reminding you that you've outgrown certain conversations. Whatever the lesson, you don't walk away empty-handed. Offense then becomes a teacher, not a tormentor. And when you collect enough of those lessons, you begin to walk through life with more grace and less armor. You realize not everything needs a comeback. Not every dig requires a defense. Sometimes silence is your answer and stillness is your victory. You also begin to see people differently. When you're not clouded by offense, you can see what others are really saying, even when they don't say it well. The angry man at work isn't angry at you. He's terrified of being seen as small. The friend who dismisses your success isn't jealous. She's ashamed she hasn't chased her own dreams. The stranger who lashes out online isn't evil. He's lonely and desperate to be heard. When you shift from offense to observation, you tap into empathy, not as an obligation, but as a natural result of seeing clearly. You no longer meet fire with fire. You meet it with water, cool, calm, and measured. This isn't about being passive. It's about being in command. Command of your attention, your energy, your emotional climate. Most of what offends us isn't about morality or truth. It's about ego. The ego hates to be questioned, challenged, or ignored. It wants validation, it wants superiority, and when it doesn't get those things, it takes offense. But the soul, the deep self, seeks understanding. It asks, what's really going on here? It watches quietly without needing to dominate. And in that space, in that sacred pause between offense and observation, transformation happens. You start to live lighter, you laugh more, you argue less, because you've chosen to be a student of the moment, not a slave to every emotion it provokes. You recognize that people will be people, flawed, messy, and sometimes reckless with their words. But their chaos does not require your participation. Their noise does not deserve your peace. You become the calm in the storm, the observer in the whirlwind, the one who knows that clarity lives not in the noise, but in the stillness just beneath it. Your energy is not infinite. It is not something you can give away mindlessly and expect it to return without cost. Your energy is currency, far more valuable than money, status, or praise, and yet, too often, people spend it recklessly. They hand it over to arguments that don't matter, to people who drain rather than nourish, to situations that bear no fruit, and to patterns that repeat the same tired lesson over and over again. And then they wonder why they feel exhausted, empty, confused. The truth is, everything you give your time, your attention, your emotions to is an investment. You are constantly spending, constantly sowing, whether you realize it or not. And if you're not careful, you'll look up one day and see that you've gone broke, not financially, but spiritually, tired not just in your body, but in your soul, depleted in your joy, in your motivation, in your vision. To spend your energy where it grows means becoming brutally honest about where it doesn't. It means learning to say no, not as a form of rejection, but as a form of protection. It means paying attention to how you feel after certain conversations, certain people, certain habits. Are you lighter, clearer, more whole? Or do you walk away confused, tense, resentful, or drained? That is your soul trying to tell you something. That is your intuition raising its hand, saying, stop investing in what does not return anything of value. Some relationships are overdrafts, some tasks are emotional debt, and some environments are like trying to grow flowers in concrete. Your effort is noble, but the ground simply won't give back what you need. This awareness doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from wisdom. It's not that you don't care anymore, it's that you care too much to waste what's sacred. You learn to prioritize peace over performance. You stop showing up where you're only tolerated. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who've already made up their minds. You stop over-explaining, over-giving, overthinking. You start asking deeper questions. Is this feeding me or depleting me? Is this aligned with who I'm becoming or tethered to who I used to be? You begin to understand that energy flows best where it is honored, and where it is not, it begins to erode you from the inside out. Spending your energy wisely means recognizing that not everyone is entitled to it. Just because someone wants your attention doesn't mean they deserve it. Just because a situation demands a reaction doesn't mean you must provide one. There is power in restraint, there is power in redirection, and there is immense power in silence when your energy is being pulled in directions that do not lead to growth. You do not have to attend every conflict you're invited to. You do not have to respond to every provocation. You do not have to be everything to everyone. Every yes to something draining is a no to something nurturing, and eventually those decisions stack up and shape the landscape of your life. Imagine your energy like sunlight. Do you cast it toward people who bloom in it, or toward those who only curse the light? Do you shine it on dreams that make you come alive, or waste it trying to revive things that have long since died? Energy is not just effort, it is essence. And where you place it determines what multiplies in your life. Focus is a form of love. Attention is a form of prayer. And when you give these gifts to places that honor them, you thrive. You begin to notice your creativity returning, your clarity sharpens, your peace expands, because you've reclaimed your power from the places that were only using it. There will always be distractions dressed up as opportunities. There will always be people who demand more of you than they ever intend to give. But when you understand the value of your energy, you stop trading it for crumbs. You start seeking reciprocity, not as a form of greed, but as a natural law of balance. You stop engaging in conversations that go nowhere. You stop chasing people who don't see your worth. You stop trying to convince anyone of your value because you already know it. And that knowledge becomes a boundary, a filter, a shield, not a wall that keeps love out, but a gate that keeps depletion away. It is not selfish to protect your energy. It is sacred. It is a form of self-respect, a declaration to the world that you will no longer bleed for things that do not heal you. You will no longer ignite your fire just to warm people who would never do the same for you. You will choose what nourishes, what uplifts, what builds. You will move toward what waters your roots, not what scorches your leaves. And in that decision, you will find your strength, Not in doing more, but in doing what matters. Not in being everywhere, but in being deeply, meaningfully, intentionally present where your energy can become something beautiful. There is a kind of strength that isn't loud, isn't aggressive, isn't about overpowering someone else or proving yourself through reaction. It is the strength of elevation, of refusing to descend into the noise, the chaos, the immaturity that often invites you to step out of character just to meet someone at their level. But true power is not found in lowering yourself to engage every insult, every provocation, every petty jab disguised as concern. It is found in the quiet but firm decision to rise above it. And rising above is not a gesture of arrogance or moral superiority. It is a declaration of self-awareness. It is knowing who you are, what you're made of, and what deserves your energy. When someone speaks to you from a place of pain, ignorance, or envy, and you respond with silence, grace, or distance, you are not weak, you are wise. You are choosing elevation over erosion. You are choosing not to reach below, not to dig into the mud, just to retrieve something that will never be worth the dirt on your hands. People will often try to pull you into their storm, not because they want to harm you directly, but because they have not yet learned to live without drama. Their chaos needs an audience. Their bitterness needs a recipient. Their emptiness needs someone to fill it, even if only with conflict. And if you are not careful, you will be baited into battles that serve no purpose and cost you your peace. You will find yourself entangled in narratives that were never yours, defending yourself in conversations where no understanding is even possible. But when you rise above, you say with your presence, I do not have to participate in dysfunction just because it's loud. You begin to understand that every fight is not yours to fight, every comment is not yours to correct, and every misunderstanding is not your burden to fix. There is freedom in not reacting. There is dignity in walking away. Reaching below is easy. It's the path of least resistance. It satisfies the ego quickly, but wounds the spirit deeply. When you lower yourself to match someone else's negativity, you might win the argument but lose your center. You might get the last word but sacrifice your inner stillness. There's a temporary satisfaction in clapping back, in setting someone straight, in returning insult for insult, but that satisfaction is hollow. Because it's not rooted in growth, in love, in purpose. It's rooted in the desire to be right, to be heard, to be dominant. And while those desires may be human, they are rarely holy. The real triumph is in restraint, in looking someone in the eye, hearing their criticism, feeling the weight of their projection, and saying, either aloud or silently, I know who I am, and I refuse to go there with you. When you rise above, you also rise within. You create space for your mind to think clearly, for your heart to stay open, for your path to remain uncluttered. You protect your energy not out of fear, but out of fierce understanding of its value. And as you do, you begin to notice how many situations lose their power when you don't engage. How many insults become irrelevant when you don't give them your time? How many people reveal their own instability when you no longer react to their provocations? This is the gift of self-mastery, not control over others, but control over your own responses. You stop living in a constant state of emotional defense. You stop bracing yourself for conflict. You start choosing your peace like it's gold, because it is. The temptation to reach below often disguises itself as justice, as necessary correction, as standing your ground. And yes, there are moments when truth must be spoken, boundaries must be asserted, and disrespect must be addressed. But even in those moments, you can rise. You can respond without rage. You can correct without contempt. You can draw the line without drawing blood. That is the discipline of emotional intelligence. That is the kind of strength the world needs more of, not reactive, not performative, but rooted. Calm not because you're afraid, but because you've evolved past the need to prove yourself in petty spaces. When you reach below, you enter the very space that diminishes you. But when you rise, you remain untouchable. Not because you're better, but because you're bigger than the moment would have you be. There's a sacredness in protecting your elevation, in knowing that your time, your voice, your presence is too valuable to be spent on people or situations that refuse to rise with you. You become selective, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Not everyone can go with you. Not every battle is meant to be fought, and not every opinion deserves a seat at your table. You begin to understand the quiet power in preserving your peace, in walking away not because you couldn't fight, but because you chose something greater. That kind of self-control becomes a light in a world addicted to reaction. And that light, when cultivated, begins to shine so brightly that even those who once tried to drag you down are forced to look up.